Victoria Hills. I'm the Chief Executive of the Royal Town Planning Institute, and thank you very much for joining us for this COVID-19 special on responding to the crisis and how planning is responding across the nations. I'm delighted I'm joined by Craig McLaren, who's our Director for Scotland and Ireland. Craig, give us a wave. And we're also joined by Richard Blyth, who's our Head of Policy. And we're joined by Roisin Willmott, who's our Director for Wales and Northern Ireland. Give us a wave. Brilliant. So we're going to have a couple of minutes each talking across the nations about how planning has moved at pace to support the response to the pandemic. So let's move first to Craig. Tell us what's going on in Scotland.
Thanks, Victoria. There's been a number of things happened. There's been relaxations of changes of use from pubs and restaurants to takeaways. There's been a lessening of enforcement and conditions restricting deliveries to shops. I think the really interesting thing which has happened is there was emergency legislation agreed by the Parliament on the 1st of April. And one of the big things in that is it extends the expiry date of planning permission, which will lapse within the next 6 months, and that'll be extended by a year. And that applies to both full and planning permission in principle, and that should last until the 30th of September, but there are provisions to extend that if need be. We've also seen that Act allow council meetings to be held without the need for the public to be there, although virtual meetings can already be held. And I know Scottish Government are also exploring issues around options around overcoming the issues with hard copy neighbour notification and also with site notices as well. The Act also amends legislation requiring local authorities to provide hard copy documentation and says that can really be done when it's reasonably practical. And the other big issue we have in Scotland just now is pre-application consultation for major planning applications. And currently there's a need for a physical public event to be held on that, and Scottish Government are looking to introduce something which allows that to happen virtually. And we know local authorities across Scotland are looking at the schemes of delegation to see where they can make officers make those decisions rather than councillors as well.
So an awful lot going on. Richard, any similarities there to what's going on in England?
Well, we're very pleased to be able to say that the UK government included in the Corona Bill provisions on planning, which are now being carried forward in secondary legislation. So we also now have the authority to undertake council business remotely, and we know that's been taken up by Waltham Forest, for example. Another thing that is within council's control is to increase the level of delegation. So Windsor and Maidenhead have been delegating all applications. Another interesting thing is to ensure that we can continue with pre-application discussions. So we know that in Cornwall, they are making that possible through phone and Skype in replacing face-to-face meetings. So I think generally we can say that councils have been stepping up to the plate within the framework that they're allowed to operate in and finding innovative ways round the crisis to keep the planning system on the rails.
That's great to hear. And is it pretty much the same in Wales, Roisin?
There are some similarities. Some differences are there haven't been the changes to the takeaway, perhaps from pubs to be as takeaways, for example, because that was already in place in Wales, and there isn't any move to extend planning permissions because, again, it was 5 years, so not really a major issue. There have been the changes to relax enforcement conditions for retail distribution, and also amendments have been made to enable emergency development under permitted development to support the efforts related to COVID-19, and local planning authorities have been asked to prioritise those applications as well. There are proposals to enable planning committees to sit remotely, and local development plan guidance has been issued to by Welsh Government to see how they can progress those. PINS Wales are continuing to validate and process appeals and other casework, and they're triaging cases to see whether site visits are needed. And interestingly, Design Commission for Wales is continuing with their design review service as well via Zoom, so a use of good technology.
Wow, that's really great to hear. And Craig, what's going on in Ireland?
I think again some similar things around relaxation of enforcement conditions and change of use in terms of retail deliveries and in terms of allowing takeaways to happen. One of the big things which has happened in Ireland, however, is there's now been a provision where you can extend the period for calculating the time allowed for carrying out planning functions by 3 weeks. So, for example, if a planning application has to be decided within 8 weeks, generally, this will be extended by a further 3 weeks and has to be done within an 11-week period as well. I think the other key thing is to let people know is that the Irish government have published an FAQ document, which is on their website. We're helping them compile that and compile questions which come in on the back of that. So go please to the website there to find out quite a lot more.
Excellent. And last but not least, Northern Ireland, how are they responding?
They're responding well as well. Local authorities are trying to get things moving, and they're being encouraged to explore greater delegation of planning applications to officers under existing legislation. But the Department for Communities is looking at remote meetings for planning committees. The Department for Infrastructure is considering amending regulations which require an event to take place as part of the pre-application community consultation to enable applicants to develop their schemes. And those planning applications which are about to expire, local authorities are being encouraged to process planning applications to expedite that. And the Planning Appeals Commission is considering how to progress remote hearings as well.
Well, I mean, that's been a fantastic summary of all of the great efforts across the nations. And I think it's fair to say, whilst it's incredibly early days still, no one can accuse planning of sitting still. Moving at pace rapidly to respond to these extraordinary circumstances will, I'm sure, all pay some dividends in the way that we operate and do planning going forward. So I should have added that all of this excellent information is going to be on our COVID-19 hub on the RTPI website. We would very much like to keep you updated. It's a very fluid, rapidly changing situation.